Will Smith. What is he? Part 3. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. We now continue our analysis of Will Smith to make a determination as to what he might be, considering evidence for a variety of sources, and allowing me, the expert, to analyse this for the purpose of classification and to extend your own knowledge. We've heard Will Smith talk about his father, which raised various indicators which give us a much better insight into what he might be. The confessional, as such, now touches on his mother. My mother, Caroline Elaine Bright, also known as Mom, is eloquent and sophisticated. She has a petite frame with long, elegant piano player's fingers, perfectly sized to deliver a gorgeous rendition of Fur Elise. She had been a standout student and was one of the first black women to ever study at Carnegie Mellon University. Mom would often say that knowledge was the only thing that the world couldn't take away from you. She loved business, banking, finance, sales, contracts. Mom always had her own money. Life moved quickly for my mother, as it often did in those days. She married her first husband at the age of 20, had a daughter, and was divorced less than 3 years later. By 25, as a struggling single mum, she was probably one of the most educated African-American women in all Pittsburgh, yet she was still working jobs beneath the level of her true potential. Feeling trapped and craving bigger opportunities, she packed up the baby and moved to live with her mother, my grandmother Gigi, in Philadelphia. My parents met in the summer of 1964. Mom was working as a notary at the Fidelity Bank in Philly. She was rolling out with some girlfriends to a party, and one of them told her she had just had to meet this man. His name was Will Smith. In many ways, Mom is the total opposite of my father, whereas Daddy-O was the boisterous, charismatic centre of attention, again suggesting those strong narcissistic traits, if not a narcissist. Mom is quiet and reserved, not because she's shy or intimidated, but because she only speaks when it improves on silence. She loves words, and always chooses them carefully. She speaks with an academic sophistication. Daddy-O, on the other hand, was loud, spewing the lingo of the 1950s North Philly hood rat. He loved the poetry of his profanity. I once heard him call a man a dirty rat, cock-sucking, low-down, mangy pig-fucker. Quite the contrast between his two parents. It's important to note here, writes Smith, that back in the day, Daddy-O was the man. 6'2", smart, good-looking. He was funny. He could sing. He could play the guitar. When Mom first saw Daddy-O, he reminded her of a tall Marvin Gaye. He was savvy and knew his way around people. Daddy-O had a way of moving through the world like everything was under control. It was all going to be fine. Again, the arrogance and confidence that comes with the need to assert that control. My mother's memory of their first days together is just a blurred montage of restaurants and clubs strung together by a stream of jokes and laughter. It sounds similar to love bombing. Mom couldn't get over how funny he was, but most important to her, he was ambitious. He had his own business. Daddy-O was going places. My father wasn't used to interacting with women of my mother's educational accomplishments. Man, this bird's smart as a motherfucker, he thought. Daddy-O was the street smarts to Mom's book smarts. My parents got married in 1966. It wasn't long before they combined their very different strengths and talents into an effective team. Mom ran Daddy-O's office, and Daddy-O got to do what he did best, work hard and make money. Both of my parents would later speak fondly of those early years. They were young, in love, ambitious, and they were moving on up. My full name is Willard Carroll Smith too, not Junior. Daddy-O would always correct people. Hey, he ain't no Junior. He felt like calling me Junior diminished both of us. Threat to control by an extension. Character trait acquisition, seeing his son as an extension of self. My twin brother and sister, Harry and Ellen, were born on May the 5th, 1971. And, counting Mom's daughter Pam, just like that, there would now be 6 of us under one roof. By the time I was 2 years old, Daddy-O had established his business firmly enough to buy a house about a mile away from my grandmother Gigi in a middle-class neighbourhood of West Philly called Winfield. I grew up on a tree-lined street of 30 greyish red brick row houses, all connected. The physical proximity of the houses cultivated a strong sense of community. For a young black family in the 1970s, this was as American dream as you could get. My story was very different from the ones being told by the young black men who were launching the global phenomenon that would later become hip-hop. In their minds, I was somehow an illegitimate artist. They would call me soft, corny, a bubblegum rapper. Criticisms that violently infuriated me. Notice the description there, that those insults have such an impact upon Will Smith, that he talks about them being not an irritant, not hurtful, but violently infuriating, which suggests that there might be a link to the issue of control and the presence of ignited fury. Looking back, I realise I may have been projecting a little, but the reason I hated it so much was that they were unknowingly poking at the thing I most hated about myself, my sense that I was a coward. Again, this recognition of potential projection and believing himself to be a coward. This could be the ability to self-reflect, which of course is not present in the narcissist. However, remember, this is a confessional that Will Smith is providing to the world at large, and therefore a narcissist could also talk about things which makes them look like they're weak as part of a pity play, which is part of that assertion of control. So again, there are potential two outcomes based upon what we're seeing so far. Daddy-O saw the world in terms of commanders and missions, a military mindset that informed every aspect of his life. He would come to run our family as though we were a platoon on a battlefield, and the house was our barracks. Again, this fits with the need to assert control, a sense of entitlement. He didn't ask us to clean our rooms or to make our beds. He commanded, police your area. That shows a rather unusual way of dealing with children and bringing them up, and again cements the likelihood that his father is a narcissist. In Daddy-O's mind, everything was life or death, black and white thinking. He was preparing his children to thrive in a harsh world, a world that he saw as chaotic and brutal. Again, that mindset is one that's often attributed to a narcissist, where the world is seen as venal, cruel, uncaring, and harsh. The instilling of fear was, and still is to a large degree, a cultural parenting tactic in the black community. Fear is embraced as a survival necessity. Or rather, the use of fear in that manner is a means to assert control over the children. It's a widely held belief that in order to protect black children, they must fear parental authority. Now, I'm not black. I therefore can't speak about whether that's accurate or not, and perhaps those of you who are from a black background can offer your views there as to whether it is a widely held belief that in order to protect black children they must fear parental authority. If it is, then his father harnesses that as a means to assert control. If it isn't, then that could be seen as a revision of history by his father as a means to assert control. The instilling of fear is viewed as an offering of love. That doesn't make any sense. But what he unwittingly created was an environment of constant tension and anxiety, i.e., a lack of control environment. Most of the times I got hit during my childhood, I didn't think I'd earned it. Application of physical violence, which is the assertion of control in the absence of emotional empathy from his father. The impact upon the young Will Smith is that he is being abused and also recognises that he doesn't believe that he's earned being hit, and he mentions that it felt like an injustice. I wasn't the kind of kid you needed to spank. I already wanted to please you. I think the corporal punishment of my childhood just convinced me I was bad. He identifies as being a people pleaser, which is often seen with codependency. The constant fear during my childhood honed my sensitivity to every detail in my environment. From a very young age, I developed a razor-sharp intuition, an ability to attune to every emotion around me. I learned to sense anger, predict joy, and understand sadness on far deeper levels than most other kids. Such a description is part of what is found with a contagion empath, or this might be the grandiosity and magical thinking of a narcissist. I process these things quickly and profoundly. A missed glance or misinterpreted word could quickly deteriorate into a belt on my ass or a fist in my mother's face. The emotional awareness has stayed with me throughout my life. Paradoxically, it has served me well as an actor and performer. I could easily recognize, comprehend, and emulate complex emotions long before I knew that people would pay me for it. It isn't the case, of course, that the emulation of complex emotions is purely the preserve of narcissists, although, of course, we are, in effect, designed to be actors because we spend our lives acting. But other people can act also, who are not just narcissists. And therefore, again, the acknowledgement that he would be able to emulate those complex emotions could suggest an aware narcissist, but again, it's unlikely that he would make such an admission in this manner. And therefore, it's either the fact that he isn't and is able to emulate those complex emotions, or, quite possibly, it's an unaware narcissist that's being allowed by the narcissism to talk about this emulation as part of grandiosity, to assert control through this particular confessional. You will note that we're seeing a lot of instances that can be interpreted one of two ways, and it's important for me to point this out to you to help you understand that when you're dealing with somebody and you're analysing their behaviours, they can be interpreted one of two ways. However, as we look over the material as a whole, and as you look over the material with the person that you're dealing with, eventually you're able to form a conclusion. And then you can go back to those instances where there seem to be two outcomes and choose the appropriate one. Either this individual exhibits emotional empathy, I've learned that, therefore I am able to find the non-narcissist explanation to the behaviour, or this individual hits many indicators that are determinative of them being a narcissist, and therefore I can go back on those behaviours where there were two outcomes to interpret it on the narcissistic route. We will, of course, be doing that as we work through the material for Will Smith, but at this juncture it's too early to say one way or the other. Hence, I provide you with both options. My father tormented me. Abuse, absence of emotional empathy, application of lack of control environment. And he was also one of the greatest men I've ever known. Notice that that kind of thinking is often found with the victim of abuse, that notwithstanding the fact that they're being abused, they still worship the person that's abusing them. That isn't logical. My father was violent, but he was also at every game, play and recital, which shows the paradoxical nature of the narcissist. He was an alcoholic, but he was sober at every premiere of one of my movies. He listened to every record, he visited every studio. The same intense perfectionism that terrorised his family put food on the table every night of my life. And this is what often makes it so confusing for a victim to know what they're dealing with, because there isn't a constant barrage of hateful behaviour. Why? There has to be periods where we're not red of tooth and claw, otherwise we would never get any of our victims. We have to be nice, we have to be pleasant, but it is an artifice. We can't be brutalising you all of the time. So many of my friends grew up either not knowing their fathers or not having their fathers around. But Daddy-O had my back and never abandoned his post, not even once. Notice that Smith gives him credit for that, but of course the fact is the man that was around was physically abusing him, creating an atmosphere of tension and anxiety, and beating up his mother. While he never learned to overcome his own demons, which is because he never wanted to, because it was an abrogation of responsibility, and not that it would do him any good anyway, he would cultivate in me the tools to confront my own. As much as we all suffered under Daddy-O's militaristic views of love and family, nobody suffered more than my mother. If two people being in charge meant everybody dies, then that meant my mother would never be in charge. The problem was that my mother wasn't the type of woman to be commanded. She was educated, proud and stubborn, and as much as we begged her to please be quiet, she refused. Once, when Daddy-O slapped her, she egged him on. "Oh, you're such a man. You think that hitting a woman makes you a man, huh?" That defiance, which is a narcissistic trait, as she stands her ground, naturally threatens his sense of control, and therefore Smith Sr. responds by, he hit her again, knocking her to the ground. She stood right back up, looked at him in the eye, and calmly said, "Hit me all you want, but you can never hurt me." I've never forgotten that, the idea that he could hit her body, but somehow she was in control of what hurt her. I wanted to be strong like that. Everybody in my house could fight, except me. Smith's mother's behaviour could be seen as an intervening factor in terms of giving him something to look to whereby he could respond with a particular coping mechanism with the environment that he was experiencing, namely to be in control of what hurt him. Ordinarily, as you know, the narcissism springs up as a self-defense mechanism to defend that child from the lack of control environment, allied, of course, with the genetic predisposition. From the information provided so far, there is certainly the environment that would cultivate a narcissist in Will Smith. His father is one, and that genetic predisposition could well have been passed down to him. Not for certain, but it's likely it has been, and there's certainly a lack of control environment as what he's described. But it might be the case that the road towards narcissism was not completed because either the reference I made earlier to his grandmother rather, and her involvement, or the way that his mother behaved caused him to cultivate an alternative view and coping mechanism. It remains to be seen, with the further evidence that we're going to explore, whether that remains the case. And join me in part 4 as we continue to do so.